Hello, amazing parents and caretakers, and welcome to the Pumped Up Parenting Podcast. I'm your family empowerment coach, Celia Kibler. I'm a mom of a blended family of 5 kids. I'm a grandma of 9 kids, an author, a teacher, a speaker, and a consultant with over 40 years of training and real-life parenting experience. I'm here to offer you practical, doable tips, strategies, and techniques that will pump up your parenting skills and create peace, love, and laughter throughout your family. In addition, I'll be interviewing some great humans that are on a mission to make your life a better, happier, and healthier life. So let's not waste any time and get started with the next episode of the Pumped Up Parenting Podcast. Thanks for listening. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pumped Up Parenting Podcast. You know, I'm always excited for my guests. You know, I would say I'm really excited, but I'm really excited about my guest today. And he's a longtime friend, met a long time ago in a wonderful mastermind fun time in California. And just think he's just a wonderful human, and he has brought music to the world. And I'm a huge fan of music and how good it is for all of us. So let me tell you a little bit about Neil Moore. So Neil created a breakthrough play-based music education method. I love that part about the play. That's a codification of the way that music occurred to him as a young child. Now they've emerged as global leaders in this music field. He is the founder of Simply Music at simplymusic.com, and he has just expanded across the globe. And I'm excited to bring him to the podcast. Neil, so happy you're here. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me, Celia. Just great to see you as well. And I really appreciate the opportunity to connect and have a chat and also share a little bit with your audience. So it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Well, I'm thrilled you're here. So if you would you tell our listeners a little bit about how you got, I know very young age, you loved music. So you state that right at the beginning. But like, what brought you to this world of music and really creating something that so many people across the globe can really take advantage of?
It's a short question to sort of a longer answer, and I'll try to condense this and be as brief as possible. And I'll just point out to everyone that they're listening to an Australian accent. So born and raised in Australia.
And it's a beautiful one. And you're listening to like a New York, Baltimore accent from me. So not quite as beautiful.
Yeah, we moved to the United States in 1994 with my incredible wife and our 3 children. So that was, over 30 years ago, coming up to 31 years ago. But these days we live binationally. My wife and I live between Melbourne, Australia, where we were born, and here in Sacramento, California. And we came here to launch Simply Music from the United States. But it started really in very early childhood. From a very, very young age, I hear music and I picture 2- and 3-dimensional shapes. And some people say, oh, that's synesthesia. And it's really not quite the same. Synesthesia, where we're born and our senses are co-joined, so to speak, and as we begin to develop as young children, our sensory pathways establish their own neural pathways. But what happens with some people is certain neural sensory pathways stay connected, and so this is where some people might hear music and see numbers, or might hear names and remember and experience colors. That's synesthesia, and usually synesthesia is located specifically to that person. Mine was a little bit different. For me, it was more like, I think of it really a bit like when we go out to the sky at nighttime and we look up and we just see all the stars. But if someone says, hey, if you join a line connecting these stars, it creates a constellation. So we distinguish a shape, a picture out of all of the dots. that was really my relationship to music. I would hear music and I would hear the flow of the melody, and it would just formulate this join the dot type of picture. I thought nothing of it. I was sort of unconscious to it. It's just that was just part of my early childhood experience. But there were five children in our family. I'm the youngest of five, only 7 years between the five of us. And my older brothers, as they each turned seven, they began piano lessons. So by the time I was born, there was already music learning going on in the home and the playing of music. And I think that contributed to my developed ear for music. But when I began studying piano myself at the age of seven, and my teacher would play the song I was going to be learning, I could picture those same shapes across the instrument. And once again, it didn't stand out as an, oh, wow, that was just the way that it occurred. The idea of learning how to read music, like most people do around the world, in traditional reading-based approaches. And my brothers, they all learned how to read music, but I saw no need for it. I felt that the page looked very intimidating, all these black lines that looked more like barbed wire on the page, rather than me being able to connect to it in any way as music. And I just didn't need it. What would happen after my lesson is that I had a strong ear for music, so I knew how it sounded, and I would just recreate the shapes and patterns. But I always thought that I was doing something wrong, and I had a lot of shame associated with that. As I would get closer to my lesson on Saturday, this fear would develop, like, is this the lesson where I'm going to get found out that I'm not reading and I'm cheating and I'm going to get into trouble? And so, during my lesson, I would sort of sit at the piano, blankly staring at the page and just pretending to read. My teacher would go to my
Looking the
mother.
part.
Yeah, just totally, totally fraudulent. My teacher would go to my mother and say, Neil's not reading, he's just pretending, thinks he's fooling me. But thankfully, my mother said, yeah, but I mean, listen to him play.
Yeah, right.
Just let him do his own thing. Like, what a great insight and what a great parenting act to see that I had an attribute that was unique to me, that was successful, and it allowed a capability and a form of self-expression for me, and she didn't get in the way of that. I
Absolutely.
have, an infinite debt of gratitude to my mother for that.
It's
So that's how
important
I
to
developed my own.
recognize your children's geniuses and their skills.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Both my parents were amazing like that. I really, really deeply appreciate that. So anyway, that's how I developed my entire musicianship. And I always knew that I belonged to music. I use that word deliberately. I don't even really know what it meant to me when I was young, but I just felt like there was nothing that I felt was as much a part of me as that experience of music. And I always wanted to do music, and I didn't even really know what that meant. I mean, Australia is a wonderful country, but going back, 60 years, I'm 68 this year, but going back 60 years, there wasn't an abundance of opportunities to be a performing artist and a musician. And I really didn't know what I was going to do, but I just knew that that's what I most wanted to do. In fact, my parents were self-employed, and that's the path I chose. I got into the restaurant industry in my early 20s. And my goal was, I'm going to do well enough and earn enough money to be able to sort of retire young and just do music, whatever that meant. And it was a weird thing. I was successful in the industry, but it was something that I struggled to reconcile, that I was successful but deeply unsatisfied. And I didn't really quite understand that. There was a certain rationale I had around that. I've got a beautiful wife, I've got great children, we live in a great home, we're doing well financially. I should be happy because that's the sort of the physical or the perceived
Right.
attributes of success. But I didn't really understand the extent to which I wasn't doing what I was being called to do. And I hadn't yet understood that calling. In my 30s, I made a series of bad business decisions, and I wonder now whether I made them or they made me.
I
But
think they made you.
yeah, we went through a bankruptcy, just completely wiped out financially. And I remember this particular day where we were just flat broke. I mean, like, I remember opening the door in the fridge at home, and my three children were there, and there was no food, and taking my wedding jewelry and going to the pawn shop, secondhand shop, and selling my wedding jewelry to get enough money for food, like broke. But I remember this particular day where I had an experience where I saw there were two things. I I saw that my life was, well, firstly, I saw that I'm losing everything I have, but I'm losing nothing of who I am. And I had this experience of wholeness.
Wow.
Like it was just this peace. Like it just felt like that was exactly the place I was meant to be in that moment. And in that moment, I pictured my life as this equation. Oh, I've been pursuing business to earn money to one day do what I want to do. And it just occurred to me as a broken equation. I thought, I'm going to flip the script. I'm going to devote myself to what I believe I'm being called to do. If there is such a thing as divine design, which I believe there is,
I do believe there is.
then I'm going to trust that a pathway will unfold that will lead me to exactly where I'm meant to be. Now, the logical side of, well, hang on a second. You have a wife, you have three children, you have financial commitments and responsibilities, and you're going to pursue music in a culture and environment where there aren't really defined opportunities for you to be able to do that. What the heck are you going to do? And I didn't know. And it wasn't that I didn't care. I just felt at peace with that decision.
Right.
But also, when I started to sort of think that through, it's like, well, I haven't learned the language of musicians. I never learned how to read. I didn't understand theory. I didn't understand anything of that sort of stuff. And really, I'm not even an advanced player. I mean, if you're a beginner and you hear me play, you'll probably think I'm good. But if I compare myself to who I listen to, I'm not even, I'm not even there. And I don't even particularly enjoy playing in public, but I'm passionate about music and I love to compose and play, for myself. But I thought I need to learn the language of musicianship. And so this is now in my mid 30s. And so I began studying, theory and learning how to read. And I built up enough knowledge, and I also had enough experience that I thought I know I can teach. And so I began teaching, and I was teaching traditionally. And just for the purpose of clarification for your listeners, when I talk about traditional music education, there's one prevailing approach that has been used for several hundred years. It's the dominant approach in any country in the world where music is taught formally. And I describe that as a reading-based approach, with the goal being, we're going to firstly teach you how to read music as a means of learning how to play music. Yeah.
That's how I
And
was
I
taught.
didn't see it at the time, but I've come to realize how preposterous that is. That would be like the equivalent of saying all young children have to learn how to read and spell as a means of learning how to talk.
Yeah, you're right.
Like,
You're right.
we would never do that. You and I were talking for years before we learned how to read and spell.
Right.
It should be exactly the same with music education. But I didn't know that at the time. And I had learned how to read. I developed a theoretical understanding. I knew I could communicate that to students, and I began teaching. And I was successful at teaching, and I quickly built up a really solid, successful studio, which was great. But I also knew that I'd learned how to, I'm sorry if I'm taking too long to answer this, but
That's all right.
I recognize something that has since actually become a mantra in the way that I've parented my children. And for me, it was like, am I able to listen long enough and quietly enough to hear what I'm being called to do? And am I willing to pursue that calling in spite of my fears, my circumstances, and my story?
And that's an
And
important message for anyone to think about.
I think so. It
Truly.
certainly is for me. And that's, as I say, that's what I've tried to bring to my own parenting of our own children. They're 37, 39, 41.
Right.
And so my wife had been an exchange student in the United States. She did a senior year of high school, and she had this experience back then. I've known my wife, listen to this, I've known my wife 19,872 days.
Oh my gosh.
We met on November the 21st, 1970 at 2 p.m. I shook her hand, and it's like I just felt like I'd come home. So
That's incredible. What
we've
a
been in
wonderful story.
we've been in each other's lives for 55 years now. Married for 44 years this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I got the best
Wonderful.
end of the deal. She is just off the charts, astounding, amazing human being. But she had been an exchange student, had this feeling when she came to the United States that she was meant to be here. Didn't even really know what that
Uh,
meant.
where did she come? Where did she exchange from? Australia?
Uh, yeah, from the same city as
Oh,
I did. And our meeting was by chance, actually. We weren't, school friends. We met through a friend of my sister's.
yeah, I had
Um,
two exchange students growing up. I actually
mm,
just came from visiting the one from Peru who now lives in Arizona. My sister's out visiting the one from France, but there she's in Italy right now. So
mm. Yeah,
so wonderful.
my wife still has a relationship with her host mother, 50 plus years later.
Yeah.
And I was in my early 20s and did a trip to the United States and stayed with them as well. I mean, it's been a beautiful
Yeah. It's been
relationship.
a wonderful thing.
Yeah. So we wanted to come to the United States, and it just felt like it was the next step in the calling. And so we came here. Um, we really had very little. In fact, just wrapping up our lives in Australia. By the time we sort of got all of that done, we ended up coming here to the United States with my wife, our three children, our life possessions in 3 suitcases, and $5,000.
Wow.
And a belief that I was meant to be here. That, people say, wow, what a risk. Didn't experience that all as a risk. Wow, that'd be scary. Didn't experience it all as being scary. It just felt like
You
there's
knew it to be.
a certain gravity to this calling, and it's just pulling me here. So I came here and I started teaching, and I built up a reputation as a successful teacher. And I had lots of students, really busy. And, I'm teaching this traditional program, this reading-based approach. And I get a call one day from this government agency, and I'm not sure what it was. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it then. There was no need to. But they said, hey, we're working with this young boy who's 8. He's blind, and he's going in and out of hospital for these procedures. We'd love him to have some activity. Do you think you could teach him music? And I just loved the opportunity to do that. And I just jumped in and said, absolutely. And I committed myself to that. After doing that, I realized, hang on, the only thing I know how to teach is this reading approach. And if this kid's blind, what the heck am I going to do? And it wasn't really until that moment that this is bizarre to me. I thought, hang on a second. I never learned to read. What was I actually doing back then? It had never consciously occurred to me to think about it. I'd never
Right. You
thought
didn't
about my
read
thinking.
music when you were a kid.
So it was like, well, what the heck was I doing? And that was the first time where I had began to think about my thinking. What was I doing when I was looking at the instrument? And I sat down. I said, let me just construct a piece. And I sat down, and as I did it, it's like, oh, I can see what I'm doing. And I began to distinguish it into describable concepts. And I thought, I bet I can show him how to feel these shapes. Because when you're going, on the instrument from note to note to note, and it
Right.
creates, like if I'm going from a white note to a black note to a white note, that sort of creates this triangle. I'll just call it a triangle, and I'll position his hands to feel it. I wonder if that would work. It did for me, but I could see the shapes. He can't, but he can feel them.
Right.
And so that's exactly what I did. And this kid just took off. He was learning
That's so
really
awesome.
quickly. He was doing great. But what happened was he'd had about 3 months of lessons with me, and he was already playing a repertoire of music. And I said to his dad one day, are you happy with Wade's progress? And his dad said, well, we're not only happy with it, but he is teaching his 4-year-old sister how to play, and she's blind too.
Oh my gosh.
And even now when I tell it, it's just like my body
It's
tingles.
incredible.
It's like I didn't know what had happened, but I knew something major just happened in that moment.
Yep.
And I thought, wow, if I could teach this kid
And
who's
he
not
could
sighted
teach.
to play, and he could turn around and teach his 4-year-old sister, and she's blind too. I wonder what would happen if I taught this to typical learners. And even then, I thought it might be this fun, like music preschool before they got onto real music, which at the time I still thought was this
Right.
traditional reading-based approach. And fortunately, I had a lot of students. And I thought, I'm just going to start sharing this and seeing what happens. And I was struck by the difference in the experience for those students, how quickly they were learning, how easily they were learning, the quantity of music that they would learn, the quality of that music. It's like, this is completely different. Oh, well, that's happening because this is so organic to me. But I also had access to other teachers. I thought, I wonder what would happen if I showed them and asked them to share it with their students. And they came back saying, we haven't seen anything like this. This is really noticeably different.
Mm.
I remember one of our educators saying, one of the teachers who I'd shown this to, she said, wow, beforehand, our parents were saying they had to force their kids to practice. Now they're having to
Now they
drag them
want
away
to.
from the piano to have dinner
Oh,
or do their homework. It's like,
how wonderful.
yeah. So I just thought, wow, this really deserves me looking at it. And I went into, R&D mode. I just went into laboratory mode. How I want to really bring a deep and comprehensive understanding to what I'm doing. How far could I take this? Would it apply to contemporary and classical and gospel and blues and development arrangements and composing and improvising? How far could I go down the track before students had to learn more about theory and reading, etc.? And as I did that and being able to share the concepts with educators along the way, it formulated itself into, what I call simply music. And, we have a global community of educators now, and we have a student community across 136 countries, and it's grown into this thing.
Wow.
I run the company. I shouldn't run the company. I'm not good at it. I don't even really enjoy it.
I
I'm, I
know.
mean, I'm adequate at best that I've kept it alive for as long as it has.
That's what I say about my companies.
But, it's really at a time where, the next step for me is to, step out and get back
Yeah.
to what I do best. So anyway, it was a
That's a
really great
wonderful
question and a long
story.
answer.
Oh
So
my, that's all right, Neil. That was
yeah,
a wonderful story. And,
yeah,
it shows, I mean, one thing I love about it is it really shows how this like rigidness, let's just say rigidness of education is really a detriment to children. The fact that they lose the play aspect, they lose the fun, they lose the imagination, they lose the creativity of learning because everything just becomes this structured platform. And when you bring all that back, kids love it and they thrive. And music itself is just such a blessing to kids. It's always like in schools, what do they cut? They cut arts, they cut music and art and all the things they should, and playing outside and recess and all the things they should not cut because it benefits the learning process for a child. They cut. And then they
yeah,
wonder why the kids don't learn so well, you
mm,
know? And I think it's so important to give children. I mean, when I grew up in a house full of music. I mean, we were like all the musicals, all the Rodgers and Hammerstein. I grew up with all the satirical musicians and political satirists and um, uh, Gilbert and Sullivan. I mean, like every
yep,
Gilbert and Sullivan thing going on, and there was always music. My mother was always singing, and my
yeah,
father was always singing, which was not
fabulous.
quite as beautiful as my mother singing. But there was always song and music, and we had
Fabulous.
piano, we had guitars, and it's it makes life so much better.
Yeah, absolutely, it does.
And
And look, I mean, I
yeah,
can, I can under. I'm sorry, I interrupted
no,
you
go
there.
go go.
I really can understand. I mean, if we go back to that period where instruments developed, and the emergence of the harpsichord and the piano, and the emergence of all of those incredible composers, it's like we have so much to be thankful for and grateful for traditional music education. It's produced a world of incredible educators. It's produced populations of incredible musicians that have not only, entertained us, but they've kept alive and preserved these historically incredible, extraordinary works of art. At the same point of time, if we are going to preserve those works of art, it's going to require a very high level of reading capability and performance capability. So we need an education system that's going to enable people to be able to retain and replicate these great works of art. And you extrapolate that down the path a little, and what we end up with is a method of learning that's really, its intention is more so, let's introduce and abide by a methodology that supports children in elevating to and having the distinctions needed for adult concert level performance. but it's not what most people want, and it's certainly not what most people need. And we are facing a very unique and extraordinary period of time in human history, and never before has it been so important in human history for us to develop our creative capability. And that's a conversation in and of itself. And so we are dealing with a really unique time in human history. And so
I
music.
agree. We should dive into a little bit because you wrote a book, Music on
Mm,
Mars, that
mm,
dives into it. And
mm,
there and it is a concern of a lot of people is
mm,
the overabundance of technology that now can create anything and do anything for us. The artificial intelligence and all of the um, automatic ways that I feel like kids are missing out on learning. I think there's so many things doing for them that they're missing out on being creative and being able to discover things that we did as children. I mean, that whole kids being bored. It's a blessing to be bored because when you're sitting around doing nothing and your mind is not being entertained, that's when magic happens. That's when the creativity happens. That's when your imagination flows. And there's so many parents, when I work with parents, that I have to say, don't just leave the TV on. Don't just leave a screen on because they're literally like, well, when they stop doing this, I don't want them not to have something to do. Well, they need to not have something to do because they need to discover things they can do on their own.
mm.
And I think your book addresses a little of this and this overuse of technology.
I Firstly, to down to a cellular level, I'm an optimist. I believe that human being by design is we're built on a foundation of love and goodness. I believe
Absolutely, I agree.
that's certainly the being part of us, and then then we stack the human on top of that, and gets in the way a little bit or a lot. But I feel somewhat the same as you do from the point of view of we've seen the impact that technology has had over the last few decades. That is nothing. That is a drop in the ocean compared to what's about to happen in the next decade or so. The level of advanced technologies that are coming down the pipeline, and not just the level of advanced technologies, but the capability of those advanced technologies to increase the speed of developing their capabilities. When we really start to see the impact of that, not just artificial intelligence, but artificial general intelligence, where we will see artificial intelligence master one human skill after another, after another, after another, and so on and so forth. We'll see that across the board. And it'll be not just these extraordinary technologies coming down the pipeline, but it'll be the convergence of technologies. So when we start to really, at a practical level, for the everyday person out there, most people, it's common for people to have heard of artificial intelligence, AI, but not really know what it means or how do I use it or how does that play a role that actually assists me in my life. There's a lack of preparedness amongst people that concerns me because I think this will be somewhat of a tsunami that will land. And if we're not taking the time to understand what's coming and also understand what is it that we can do to prepare ourselves, then I think we're going to see problems emerge. And part of the challenge there is a lot of people say, well, it's very difficult to know how to prepare ourselves when so much about what's coming down the pipeline is unpredictable. Well, that is true. But what we can predict is that no matter what, it's going to require us to have to think differently. It is going to require us to rethink who and what we are as a species. And our ability to do that is a direct function of creativity. So what we can do is look and say, well, I'm of the view that regardless of whatever else emerges, the one dominant personal attribute that will lead the future will be creativity. And so for me, anything and everything that we can do that develops our creative capability becomes critical. And what I think is remarkable is that there's a new area of science emerging that is so fortuitous. I just think it's so remarkable. Can I touch on this a little bit?
Absolutely.
Look, generally, I think it's fair to say that, as a species, we love music. Every culture has
Yes.
music, right? And it's been
Well,
part of it
even,
forever.
yeah, I think
And
we
we're not playing it.
naturally love music.
Yeah. Yeah. And we think it's a good thing. It's there as background music. It's entertaining. It's there helping us relax, to deal with sadness. We
Right.
understand that there's
It's
an
there to add
investment.
fun, add
Yeah.
sleep,
All
add
of that.
like everything. It can
Yeah.
affect everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And even those of us who don't play, those of us who are under the illusion that we're not musical, which is an illusion,
Yeah, I
humans
believe so too.
by design are a music making species. There's a very fine line between oblivious and obvious, very fine line. And we're so musical, we just can't see the forest for the trees. And we're not even aware of it. I cannot possibly count the number of times in my career. I've been training music educators for 30 years, and I've trained thousands of music educators, and I'm around music educators who are around people learning music, as well as people who don't believe that they're capable of learning music. And this statement along the lines of, I haven't got a musical bone in my body.
Yeah,
There are people who believe that to be true. I've got two left feet.
I think they do.
And it's like, okay, hang on a
They don't
second.
even understand the rhythms of life, of
Yeah,
everyday life.
yeah.
Everything's a rhythm.
And I said, let's have a listen to what you just said, but I don't want you to listen to the words. You said, I haven't got a musical bone in my body. Let's have a listen to that, but don't listen to the words. Listen to the musicality of that. You said, I haven't got a musical bone in my body. I haven't got a musical bone in my body. I haven't got a musical bone in my body. Da 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 da. I haven't got a musical bone in my body. Da 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 da. You can't utter a single sentence without demonstrating a
Right.
mastery over really complex musical concepts. And we're doing that not only with rhythm, with pitch, with variations in pitch, with variations in emphasis, like mastery of rhythm. We go to a concert and we applaud. Up, 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 up. We're not even thinking about it. We're walking left, right, not even thinking about it. We pick up a toothbrush. We're sawing a loaf of bread. We're knocking on a door. I
When I
mean, it's
turn on my directional
even,
in the car, I sing to it. I always
yeah,
sing like because
yes,
the directional itself is like background, like a beat. And I like make
yes,
up some song.
yes. And so one of the things that I think is needed, which I believe would transform the world, is if we could bring into consciousness both the understanding and the embracing of the fact that all human beings, without exception, are deeply, naturally, profoundly musical. We are first and foremost, we are a musical species, a music making species coming out of us all day, underscoring our walking, our talking, our actions.
I agree.
That's one thing. If our world could just embrace that, that opens up a whole new possibility. Now, why is that even important? Well, here's why. We know that the world that we're facing that's hurtling towards us is going to redefine life on Earth. We know that it's going to redefine what it means to be human. And we know that it's going to require us to rethink ourselves and rethink who and what we are. And that requires creativity. We now know that this illusion that some people are creative and others aren't. I'm not the creative type. I'm more of a logical type. Not true. All human beings have creative capability. Just look at what your brain does at nighttime when you're dreaming. Are you kidding? It creates
Exactly.
these incredible three-dimensional, incredible scenarios with, 1 minute I'm talking to my best friend and the next minute I'm climbing a tree in the Sahara. I mean, it's like,
Right.
and it all makes sense. I mean, the brain is just like this
Yeah.
creation making device all the time. All human beings are naturally creative, but we're also understanding that our creative capability, there's a difference between creativity and creative capability. Creativity is the expression of creative capability. Creative capability is what's the machinery that governs the extent to which you can be creative. And that machinery isn't in an app or a laptop or a device. That machinery has everything to do with the connectivity within our brain. In
Yeah.
other words, creativity and neural connectivity go hand in hand. The more neurally connected your brain is, the more creatively capable your brain is. Why is that important? Why that's important is because science is discovering that musicianship, specifically learning to play, provides the brain with this critical neurological nutrition that literally changes the structure of the brain's white matter. It grows the gray matter in different regions of the brain. It increases the short range and long range connection. It creates new connections. I was just listening to Dr. Lewis Clark, the neuroscientist, last week, and he was saying how learning music activates the brain more than any other activity.
It lights it up.
More than any other activity. You know, when you're learning music, your brain is creating up to 200,000 synapses per second.
Wow.
40 brain regions being activated at one time. So we talked earlier about all the great things that we know and love about music. That's true. But now what we're seeing is, wow, music has an entirely new role to play in our culture. And wouldn't it be incredible with all of this technology coming down the pipeline that the nutrient that we need in order for us to flourish in the face of that is to reconnect with something that we discovered 60,000 years ago, which is the ability to play music. There's that flute that was found, made from the thigh bone of the cave bear. It was made 60,000 years ago by Neanderthals. We were playing music before we had language.
Right.
Like to say, musicality gives us language. And now to discover, wow, for us to return back to that which is uniquely human, that to a cellular level is innate within us, and we can develop this capability. And not only is it this beautiful form of self-expression, the fun, the joy, the communal aspect, the psychological benefits, the emotional benefits, but we're also helping to future prepare our brains, future protect the health of our brains. This is incredibly important. This is a message that we need to dial up and amplify, because the extraordinary opportunity here and the responsibility you have is to understand the fact that if we are going to flourish, not just function, if we're going to flourish in the near future, we must elevate the creative capability of humanity.
I absolutely agree.
Musicianship has an entirely new role to play in providing the brain with the nutrition that it needs to help us do that. And my playing-based methodology, it gets people connected to their musicianship.
Yeah. And, even, when I'm talking to parents, they're like, my kids don't want to do their chores. They don't want to clean up. I'm like, throw on some music. They'll do it. Do it. You want to burn a kid's energy. Well, the weather's bad. I'm like, put on music, do a freeze dance. Put on music, have them dance, stop the music. They'll freeze. They'll do that forever. They love anything you add music to increases the fun, the energy, and the camaraderie of each other. I mean, it's a great way to connect with your kids, with your students, with people. I mean, look at churches and religious organizations. There's always singing. There's always singing, and everybody sings together, and no one cares, well, my voice is not so good, and my voice is not so good, and this person's voice. Everybody just sings because it's joyful, and it brings connection and, and enlightenment to the world. I mean, helps you with mindfulness. It helps you relax. It helps you sleep. It helps you bring up your moods, and adjust, if you're not feeling great. There are so many benefits. And while you're listening to music, like you said, great things happen to your brain. And if we always have a screen in front of our face, we're not giving our brains the opportunity to grow and expand and create.
Yeah.
So tell us about, your book, I know, touches on what we just talked about, Music on Mars. And is it available? Where is it available?
Well, Amazon. It only got released last week, but actually I'm excited. It's a #1 new release. So that's pretty
cool. It should be. Yay, good. We need more and more people reading it. So go to Amazon and get Music on Mars. I will add it to my Amazon store, which is amazonforparents.com, and we'll put it in there. It'll be easy to find.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And just so you guys know, if you want to connect with Neil, he has 2 websites. Do you want to tell us about your 2 websites? Which ones?
Well, I mean, if you're wanting to find out more about my music education methodology, if you go to simplymusic.com, SIMPLY, simplymusic.com, you find out plenty about it there. I also engage now as both an author and a speaker and an educator and a husband and a dad and a granddad and all that. So my personal website is theneilmoore.com, the as in THE, neilmoore.com. Yeah. I'm
How do
excited
your
about
did do all of your children play an instrument? Do they all, or do they play more than one instrument, or do they more like the singing, dancing? Like, where does music come in for your kids
yeah,
and your grandkids?
they all play. My my oldest son is actually has a bunch of capabilities, but plays trumpet and plays professionally. And my middle son is a music producer in LA. My daughter plays piano, but she chose, she's an editorial stylist. She's been living in New York for 15 years, but just moved to LA. So they're all they're in what
Creative.
would be considered the creative fields. But of course, I'm of the view that creativity's got to be democratized, and we've got to understand there's creativity in architecture, in accounting, in
Right.
science, in physics. Creativity's anytime, you know, that's one of the things also where we need to democratize creativity and get away from thinking of it as being this ethereal thing. Creativity, the bottom line is it's just if you can look at things differently, see things differently, think about things differently, do things differently, that is a function of creativity.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
and sometimes you just have to pause and think of,
Mm.
and if you're wishing your kids would be more creative, give them the time to be creative. Like think of like how you, if you're driving, all of a sudden you think of, oh, I should do this or some idea, or in the shower. When you have that time where you're just pausing from life, that's when stuff comes to your mind. That's when your mind's really hard at work thinking of all these cool things and cool ideas. And you have to please allow your kids that downtime. Don't overschedule them. Don't, they're like, oh, well, we need music lessons. Well, it's fine to do music lessons. And absolutely look up simplymusic.com. But don't overschedule where they have to do something every single day after school of the week. Give them downtime. We all need downtime. And that is truly when creativity happens. If you are busy entertaining your child 24/7, you're doing them a disservice.
You know, the most of the most successful entrepreneurs that I know, and when I say successful, I don't mean just financially. I mean, we're talking about people whose focus is how can I contribute to elevating the quality of life of people on Earth. Most of the most successful entrepreneurs I know schedule time to do nothing, apparently nothing,
Yeah.
where it's just time to just sit and muse and sit and contemplate, and just sit and allow themselves to think, not even something, but allow themselves to be thought, like allow some thinking to emerge. Very difficult to do that when you're in that really high frantic state of attending to this, got to do that, make the call,
Right.
finish the document, but the ability to just stop and think. And even with very young children, there's an article that I wrote on Medium, 7 ways to raise a musical baby. There are things that even expectant mothers can be doing to help neurologically develop the wiring of their children's brain. That's an article that the listeners might want to just check out.
Yeah, I'll have to get the link for it and I'll put it in the show notes. It's so true. When we fill up our schedule with so many things or they're on screens all the time, I have parents literally say to me, well, if there's no screen, what do I do with my child? How do I play with my child? And we're 1 year apart. So we grew up no screens. We didn't have screens for a long. We didn't even have TV when we started. I remember the first TV we got, and then we were going to get a color TV. And my father said, when I stopped sucking my thumb, because all the rest of the kids did, we would get a color TV. I didn't stop, so we got one anyway. But, it's like, you know, we went outside and we played and we did fun things
Yeah.
and we always had music and we
Yes.
had instruments and we did things that were fun just with us. We found our own fun. And kids need to find their fun on their own. They don't need to be given, okay, do this, do this. And then they're like, well, I'm bored. My grandkids, they come up to me and say, I'm bored. They don't even say it anymore because they know what I'm going to say. And I'll be like, well, who's making you bored? And they'll go, I am. I'm like, okay, exactly. So go find something to do. You know, I mean, I could be doing what you're doing and be thrilled to death, so it's all up to you to decide to find your fun. So, it is really important to give kids that time where they can just be creative in their own mind, in their own play with stuff, not even have a million toys. You can have a box of instruments and they'll have a blast. You can have pa paper towel holders. You can make instruments. It's like there's so many fun things to do and go outside. So much music outside. The nature is full of music.
It was a different experience for us, growing up. I mean, I came from a family where, our parents were, considered comfortable. And so it wasn't like we wanted for anything. At the same point in time, it was like if we had lunch, after lunch, it was like outside having
Right.
to
Come on.
self-entertain, self-activate, self-engage. What are we going to do? And it wasn't as if that was experienced as a responsibility or a burden. That was just up to us to imaginate our own life into existence.
Right.
So,
And there's something to be said for that. When you go back and you look at, you know, years of tribal families, they didn't their kids are not, directed all the time. And their kids are part of things. They do laundry together. Parents will be like, "Well, I don't know what to play with my child." I'm like, "But I know I'm supposed to spend time with them." Well, spend time with them cooking dinner, do laundry, fold clothes. Like they don't just have to do kid things. Spend time doing family things and adult things, and they just want to feel big anyway, so they'll be happy to help if you let them. And they need that downtime because the rat race of the world right now is causing so much stress. The Surgeon General of the United States just did a study last year on how parents are more stressed out than ever before. And this life, this chaotic life, I'm all about stopping parents from yelling at their kids, and the chaotic life just encourages it because
mm,
everybody's just stressed out. There's no, they don't allow for the calm. So, and by the way, guys, the International Day of Calm is coming on April 5th. Day of Calm Summit, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, April 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Go to dayofcalm.org, register to be part of the summit. It's all free, it's all virtual. Okay, so that was a little plug for Calm.
very good.
And but anyway, Neil, I've so enjoyed this conversation, and we could keep talking about this forever because
Yeah.
there is nothing bad about music, and all of the music that comes generation from generation learns from the generation before. You'll hear
Yeah.
all these repeat patterns and rhythms, and they'll be like, "Oh, this came from Beethoven, or this came from Mozart, or whoever," And there's just so much to say about the benefits and the wonder of music. But we've said so much already. Can you give our listeners one more piece of advice or anything that's key to getting their family more musically involved?
Well, I think the most important thing that we can become aware and conscious of is the fact that every one of your listeners, even those who may consider that they're not musical, every one of your listeners is deeply, naturally, profoundly musical. And the more that you can use musical as a means of providing your brain with critical neurological nutrition, without even realizing it, you are increasing neural connectivity, you're future preparing your brain, you're future protecting the health of your brain, and you're positioning yourself to be able to flourish and deal with the extraordinary complexities that we're all going to be faced with as these major breakthroughs in technology begin to integrate their way into our lives.
Absolutely great advice. And instead of going on a car ride and having everybody in the family on a screen or on their phones put on some music, sing songs. We used to sing songs on long trips all the time.
Yep.
That's what we did. We didn't have screens. We sang songs and just get the music in there. Put on music. If you're playing, you're fixing dinner and you're all fixing dinner together, I hope. Put on some background music, sing songs. It's so much fun. It's how I grew up. There's a lot of great music out there. So discover music. Neil, thank you so much for being here. I've had such a good time and learned so much from you. And
Oh.
I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Celia. I really appreciate it as well. Thanks for the opportunity to reach out and connect with your listeners. And I appreciate it. And I hope this has been a contribution to your community.
Absolutely. It's contribution to the world. And I hope you guys remember this and really reflect on what you heard here. And absolutely, if you know someone else, and I'm sure every one of you do, please share this out. Let's get this out to everybody. So we're starting to do a little more intention about including music, encouraging music, and letting everyone know that you have the music in you. You've got the music in you. You know how we always say, got the music in me. So do it. Get the music on, dance, have fun. Start putting in that music. Your kids will be much wiser for it. And they will learn better. Don't you want them to learn better? You want them to learn better. So get that music going. Don't remove it and don't make fun of their music because, that's what generations do. They make fun of the new music. I find myself doing that myself. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. And I know Neil and I are both very grateful for you taking time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us.
Yep.
Share this out, comment, let us know how you liked it. Take one tip, do one thing today to put a little music into your world. And I thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Neil, very much.
My pleasure.
And as always, I wish you all days filled with peace, love, lots of laughter and music.
Yay.
And I'll see you here next time on the Pumped Up Parenting Podcast. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Pumped Up Parenting Podcast. If this episode was helpful to you, please share it with a friend and leave us a review that will help others. Wonder why kids don't come with a manual? Well, wonder no more, because I wrote you one, and it's just won a wonderful Mom's Choice Award. Go to celiasbooks.com and buy your copy of Raising Happy Toddlers, as well as my children's books. I appreciate you being part of my mission to help 10 million parents stop yelling at their kids. Please be intentional and hug on those kids of yours. See you at the next episode.